Hey, welcome everybody. Can you hear me? Probably too loudly. This has been our morning this morning. Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy you guys are here. As you can imagine, there was a little screw up. It's my fault. But I want to really appreciate all the people who helped me get you here this morning. And that includes Spice of Life, who was on it like white on rice. They were right there. And also the Avalon, who just let us slide through the door. So thank you. And all you people for being here. So Meryl is going to help us by starting with the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test.
So if you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And for the four-way test, I want to remind you, which you already know, how important the four-way test is. It not just in Rotary, but our whole lives. But I want you to kind of paraphrase John Kennedy. The four-way test really comes in not when things are easy, but when they're hard. So as you're reciting them, think about those. Okay, of the things we say, do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think Jancy's going to help us with guests and visitors.
Okay. Welcome all guests and any visiting Rotarian here today, please stand. Yes. Connie, do you like to?
Constance Holden, I am the wife of T.K. Smith, and I am also a member of the Boulder Valley Rotary Club. And I came here today because I was interested in hearing your speaker, but that's not really true. I was interested in seeing Mary Jean and Peter.
My guest has been here a couple times. He lives in Longmont, but his heart is with Boulder Rotary and plans to join. Later in his life, got a PhD in peace and conflict resolution, worked with the United Nations for a number of years. Jim Adams.
Well, it's been wonderful for us. We've been having a trip down memory lane for the last 3.5 weeks or so, and visited all 3 Rotary clubs. We've especially enjoyed the Carl Music Festival. I hope you all realize what a treasure that group is and how wonderful they are. But I think this is our last meeting. We leave Friday next in the morning to head back to Port Townsend. We've enjoyed ourselves thoroughly.
I feel the same way, and thank you for having us.
Hi, I'm Eve Kilmer, and this is my friend Linda Monte, my hiking buddy, and she was asking me the other day about volunteer opportunities. I said, oh, I've got the place for you.
Are there any other guests? Thank you all for being here.
Are there any guests on Zoom? Mr. Anderson?
Yes, we have Dominica with us. Dominica, you want to unmute and say hello?
Yes, thank you very much, Duke. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dominica Prader, past president of the Rotary Club of Montego Bay. Currently, I am club secretary, and it's good to be with you again. Thank you for having me.
Do we have one more? Is there Bob?
Bob, do Do you want to unmute and say hello?
Hi, Bob Durr. I moved to Boulder in March with my significant other, Haley, and I am looking to get plugged in on the volunteer engagement side of things. I really like education.
Hey, welcome, Bob. Thank you for being here. All right, we are moving along. We're running a little bit late, so we're going to try and take things as quick as we can, because majority of what we'd like to do today is really about talking to each other. So I have a couple of announcements, and then we'll get started. The first announcement is that I want you to save the date. Rotation Day is going to be September 9th. It is going to be a ton of fun. It's the first one we've had in 2 years, I think. Christina Louis is here, and she has been putting it all together for us, and we really appreciate all the work that she's done. Second thing is that we're going to be at the Avalon next week. So don't forget, it'll be in the rib. It's in the rib this week. Next week we are going to be celebrating the 100th birthday of Boulder Community Health. So we're going to have two big weeks from Boulder Community Health. Hopefully there might be cake. It's going to be a ton of fun. So we'll be here for that. All right, I would like you to get your your raffle tickets out. Is everybody ready? We have a winner. I don't have the first however many numbers. I have the last four numbers. So that's what we're going to be looking at. The winner is 9428. Oh, yay! Sin. All right.
My trick worked. Instead of buying 3, I just bought 1.
Oh my gosh! Don't tell Bill Anderson. He said buy more. All right. Right behind you. John Sullivan's going to set you up. All right. I'm sorry. I'm moving around, and I apologize. The exercise we're going to do today, we're going to listen to a TED Talk by a great author named Dan Pink. Has anybody read any of his books? I've read like 3 or 4 of his books. Susan, of course, has. So he writes interesting books about interesting topics, and what we're going to be hearing about today is motivation. What will happen is Carl's going to lead us, after we watch this 18-minute talk, Carl's going to lead us in a discussion. We're going to, as tables, we're going to discuss a couple of questions, and then we're going to report back to each other. But this is really about us talking to each other, getting motivated, getting inspired, and what we can take out of that. So if we're ready, Fred?
I need to make a confession at the outset here. A little over 20 years ago, I did something that I regret. Something that I'm not particularly proud of. Something that in many ways I wish no one would ever know. But that here I feel kind of obliged to reveal. In the late 1980s, in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school. Now, in America, law is a professional degree. You get your university degree, then you go on to law school. And when I got to law school, I didn't do very well. To put it mildly, I didn't do very well. I, in fact, graduated in the part of my law school class that made the top 90% possible. Thank you. I never practiced law a day in my life. I pretty much wasn't allowed to. But today, against my better judgment, against the advice of my own wife, I want to try to dust off some of those legal skills, what's left of those legal skills. I don't want to tell you a story. I want to make a case. I want to make a hard-headed, evidence-based, dare I say lawyerly case for rethinking how we run our businesses. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, take a look at this. This is called the candle problem. Some of you might have seen this before. It was created in 1945 by a psychologist named Carl Duncker. Carl Duncker created this experiment that's used in a whole variety of experiments in behavioral science. And here's how it works. Suppose I'm the experimenter. I bring you into a room. I give you a candle, some thumbtacks, and some matches. And I say to you, your job is to attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Now, what would you do? Many people begin trying to thumbtack the candle to the wall. Doesn't work. Some people, and I saw somebody kind of make the motion over here, some people have a great idea where they light the match, melt the side of the candle, try to adhere it to the wall. It's an awesome idea, doesn't work. And eventually, after 5 or 10 minutes, most people figure out the solution, which you can see here. The key is to overcome what's called functional fixedness. You look at that box and you see it only as a receptacle for the tacks, but it can also have this other function as a platform for the candle. The candle problem. Now, I want to tell you about an experiment using the candle problem done by a scientist named Sam Glucksberg, who's now at Princeton University in the US. This shows the power of incentives. Here's what he did. He gathered his participants and he said, I'm going to time you how quickly you can solve this problem. To one group, he said, I'm going to time you to establish norms, averages, for how long it typically takes someone to solve this sort of problem. To the second group, he offered rewards. He said, if you're in the top 25% of the fastest times, you get $5. If you're the fastest of everyone we're testing here today, you get $20. Okay, now this is several years ago, adjusted for inflation. It's a decent sum of money for a few minutes of work. Okay, it's a nice motivator. Question, how much faster did this group solve the problem? Answer, it took them on average 3.5 minutes longer. 3.5 minutes longer. Now this makes no sense, right? I mean, I'm an American, I believe in free markets, that's not how it's supposed to work, right? If you want people to perform better, you reward them, right? Bonuses, commissions, their own reality show, incentivize them. That's how business works, but that's not happening here. You've got an incentive designed to sharpen thinking and accelerate creativity, and it does just the opposite. It dulls thinking and blocks creativity. And what's interesting about this experiment is that it's not an aberration. This has been replicated over and over and over again for nearly 40 years. These contingent motivators. If you do this, then you get that. Work in some circumstances, but for a lot of tasks, they actually either don't work or often they do harm. This is one of the most robust findings in social science and also one of the most ignored. I spent the last couple of years looking at the science of human motivation, particularly the dynamics of extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators. And I'm telling you, it's not even close. If you look at the science, there is a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And what's alarming here is that our business operating system, think of the set of assumptions and protocols beneath our businesses, how we motivate people, how we apply our human resources. It's built entirely around these extrinsic motivators, around carrots and sticks. That's actually fine for many kinds of 20th century tasks. But for 21st century tasks, that mechanistic reward and punishment approach doesn't work, often doesn't work, and often does harm. Let me show you what I mean. So Glucksberg did another experiment similar to this, where he presented the problem in a slightly different way, like this up here. Okay? Attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Same deal. You were timing for norms. You were incentivizing. What happened this time? This time, the incentivized group kicked the other group's butt. Why? Because when the tacks are out of the box, it's pretty easy, isn't it? If-then rewards work really well for those sorts of tasks, where there's a simple set of rules and a clear destination to go to. Rewards, by their very nature, narrow our focus, concentrate the mind. That's why they work in so many cases. And so for tasks like this, a narrowed focus where you just see the goal right there, zoom straight ahead to it, they work really well. But for the real candle problem, you don't want to be looking like this. The solution's not over here. The solution's on the periphery. You want to be looking around. That reward actually narrows our focus and restricts our possibility. Let me tell you why this is so important. In Western Europe, in many parts of Asia, in North America, in Australia, white-collar workers are doing less of this kind of work and more of this kind of work. That routine, rule-based, left-brain work, certain kinds of accounting, certain kinds of financial analysis, certain kinds of computer programming has become fairly easy to outsource, fairly easy to automate. Software can do it faster. Low-cost providers around the world can do it cheaper. So what really matters are the more right-brain, creative, conceptual kinds of abilities. Think about your own work. Think about your own work. Are the problems that you face, or even the problems we've been talking about here, are those kinds of problems, do they have a clear set of rules and a single solution? No. The rules are mystifying. The solution, if it exists at all, is surprising and non-obvious. Everybody in this room is dealing with their own version of the candle problem. And for candle problems of any kind, in any field, those if-then rewards, the things around which we've built so many of our businesses, don't work. Now, I mean, it makes me crazy. And this is not, here's the thing, this is not a feeling. Okay, I'm a lawyer, I don't believe in feelings. This is not a philosophy. I'm an American, I don't believe in philosophy. This is a fact, or as we say in my hometown of Washington, D.C., a true fact. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let me marshal the evidence here, because I'm not telling you a story, I'm making a case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Some evidence. Dan Ariely, one of the great economists of our time, he and 3 colleagues did a study with some MIT students. They gave these MIT students a bunch of games that involved creativity and motor skills and concentration. And they offered them for performance 3 levels of rewards. Small reward, medium reward, large reward. Okay? Do really well, you get the large reward, on down. What happened? As long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better the performance. Okay? But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Then they said, okay, let's see if there's any cultural bias here. Let's go to Madurai, India and test this. Reward standard of living is lower. In Madurai, a reward that's modest by North American standards is more meaningful there. Same deal. A bunch of games, 3 levels of rewards. What happens? People offered the medium level of rewards, did no better than people offered the small rewards. But this time, people offered the highest rewards. They did worst of all. In 8 of the 9 tasks we examined across 3 experiments, higher incentives led to worse performance. Is this some kind of touchy-feely socialist conspiracy going on here? No, these are economists from MIT, from Carnegie Mellon, from the University of Chicago. And do you know who sponsored this research? The Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. That's the American experience. Let's go across the pond to the London School of Economics. LSE, London School of Economics, alma mater of 11 Nobel laureates in economics. Training ground for great economic thinkers like George Soros and Friedrich Hayek and Mick Jagger. Just last month, economists at LSE looked at 51 studies of pay-for-performance plans inside of companies. Here's what the economists there said. We find that financial incentives can result in a negative impact on overall performance. There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And what worries me as we stand here in the rubble of the economic collapse is that too many organizations are making their decisions, their policies about talent and people, based on assumptions that are outdated, unexamined, and rooted more in folklore than in science. And if we really want to get out of this economic mess, and if we really want high performance on those definitional tasks of the 21st century, the solution is not to do more of the wrong things, to entice people with a sweeter carrot or threaten them with a sharper stick. We need a whole new approach. The good news about all this is that the scientists who've been studying motivation have given us this new approach. It's an approach built much more around intrinsic motivation, around the desire to do things because they matter, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important. And to my mind, that new operating system for our businesses revolves around three elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, the urge to direct our own lives. Mastery, the desire to get better and better at something that matters. And purpose, the yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves. These are the building blocks of an entirely new operating system for our businesses. I want to talk today only about autonomy. In 20th century, we came up with this idea of management. Management did not emanate from nature. Okay, management is it's not a tree, it's a television set. Okay, somebody invented it. And it doesn't mean it's going to work forever. Management is great. Traditional notions of management are great if you want compliance. But if you want engagement, self-direction works better. Let me give you some examples of some kind of radical notions of self-direction. And what this means, you don't see a lot of it, but you see the first stirrings of something really interesting going on. Because what it means is, it means paying people adequately and fairly, absolutely. Getting the issue of money off the table, and then giving people lots of autonomy. Let me give you some examples. How many of you have heard of the company Atlassian? Okay, looks like less than half. Atlassian is an Australian software company, and they do something incredibly cool. A few times a year, they tell their engineers, go for the next 24 hours and work on anything you want. As long as it's not part of your regular job. Work on anything you want. So the engineers use this time to come up with a cool patch of code, to come up with an elegant hack. Then they present all of these stuff that they've developed to their teammates, to the rest of the company, in this wild and woolly all-hands meeting at the end of the day. And then, being Australians, everybody has a beer. They call them FEDEX days. Why? Because you have to deliver something overnight. It's not bad. It's a huge trademark violation, but it's pretty clever. That one day of intense autonomy has produced a whole array of software fixes that might never have existed. And it's worked so well that Atlassian has taken it to the next level with 20% time, done famously at Google, where engineers can spend 20% of their time working on anything they want. They have autonomy over their time, their task, their team, their technique. Okay, radical amounts of autonomy. And at Google, as many of you know, about half of the new products in a typical year are birthed during that 20% time. Things like Gmail, Orchid, Google News. Let me give you an even more radical example of it. Something called the results-only work environment, the ROW, created by 2 American consultants in place at about a dozen companies around North America. In a row, people don't have schedules. They show up when they want. They don't have to be in the office at a certain time or any time. They just have to get their work done. How they do it, when they do it, where they do it, is totally up to them. Meetings in these kinds of environments are optional. What happens? Almost across the board. Productivity goes up, worker engagement goes up, worker satisfaction goes up, turnover goes down. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These are the building blocks of a new way of doing things. Now, some of you might look at this and say, that sounds nice, but it's utopian. And I say, nope. I have proof. In the mid-1990s, Microsoft started an encyclopedia called Encarta. They had deployed all the right incentives. All the right incentives. They paid professionals to write and edit thousands of articles. Well-compensated managers oversaw the whole thing to make sure it came in on budget and on time. A few years later, another encyclopedia got started. Different model, right? Do it for fun. No one gets paid a cent or a euro or a yen. Do it because you like to do it. Now, if you had, just 10 years ago, if you had gone to an economist anywhere and said, hey, I got these 2 different models for creating an encyclopedia, If they went head to head, who would win? 10 years ago, you could not have found a single sober economist anywhere on planet Earth who would have predicted the Wikipedia model. This is the titanic battle between these two approaches. This is the Ali Frazier of motivation, right? This is the Thrilla in Manila, all right? Intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic motivators. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose versus carrots and sticks. And who wins? Intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, and purpose in a knockout. Let me wrap up. There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And here's what science knows. 1. Those 20th century rewards, those motivators we think are the natural part of business, do work, but only in a surprisingly narrow band of circumstances. 2, those if-then rewards often destroy creativity. 3, the secret to high performance isn't rewards and punishments, but that unseen intrinsic drive, the drive to do things for their own sake, the drive to do things because they matter. And here's the best part. Here's the best part. We already know this. The science confirms what we know in our hearts. So, if we repair this mismatch between what science knows and what business does, if we bring our notions of motivation into the 21st century, if we get past this lazy, dangerous ideology of carrots and sticks, we can strengthen our businesses, we can solve a lot of those candle problems, and maybe, we can change the world. I rest my case.
Okay, now it's your turn. While Fred is putting up the slide with the ground rules for our discussion here, I will point out that I did read Daniel Pink's biography, and in fact, he was editor of the Yale Law Review, so I think there was maybe a little bit of hyperbole in his self-deprecating humor, but it's an inspiring talk for me in any case. Okay, so here's what we're going to do in groups on Zoom and at our tables, and some of you where there are just one or two of you at a table might want to combine with others. But we're going to have 10 minutes of discussion at your table. You can talk about anything you want to talk about, as long as it's related to this puzzle of motivation. We have some suggested questions here, but it can be up to you. You can talk about, have you heard of this before and applied it in your organization or in your business? And if not, has this gotten you thinking about maybe different ways of rewarding folks? And then another question that we would like you to address, if you have time, is how might these principles apply to Boulder Rotary Club? So here's what we're going to do. At each table, there's a piece of paper and a pen. The first thing you're going to do is to choose a timekeeper at your table, and the timekeeper's job, I'll help you by announcing how much time is left, but the timekeeper's job is to make sure that everybody at your table gets airtime, okay? When 10 minutes are up, I want everybody at each table to have said something. Then you'll also choose a reporter at the beginning who's going to be taking notes, and at the end they are going to get the grand total of 1 minute to report back something interesting that happened at your table. You can't do a detailed summary in 1 minute, but maybe you can tell the best anecdote or what made people laugh or the one nugget that you think came out of this whole thing. So before we do that, any questions? Okay, so I'm going to start my stopwatch here, and we'll have 10 minutes for discussion.
Yeah, and folks, I'm going to assign breakout rooms for each of the folks who are online, and you should see that come through right now to just move into that room.
The 10 minutes has started.
like someplace where it's.
Time. Let's come back together, please. Thank you. So we're going to begin the reporting back now. And as I said before, you're limited to 1 minute, so be succinct. And we're going to start with the breakout groups on Zoom. And while they are reporting, I'd like to ask the reporters from each table to come up here in front and line up. And we'll pass the microphone one to another so there's no delay from table to table, and we have semi-decent lighting for the camera rather than doing it at the tables. So Bill and Chad are Zoom moderators. Have you got your groups ready to report?
Dominica, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. We had 4 people in our group. We had myself, and we had Jim and Randy and Linda. And Linda and Jim have worked in organizations where there are incentives and there's commission and these kind of financial rewards, which are set out by the company. But in both cases, I think they said the rewards were very top-down, prescribed. There was no autonomy in giving or receiving these awards. Whereas Randy told us about his own experience as he was a self-employed lawyer making a lot of money, and then after a few years he decided that he wanted to do peace and mediation work, which cut his income by 75%, but his sense of purpose and his sense of mastery and autonomy gave him much greater job satisfaction. And so the money really, once he got going with the work in the Peace Foundation, he found a great deal more happiness in his work. So, yeah, those were the examples we received.
Your 1 minute is up. Thank you. And for those who are on Zoom, please mute yourselves if you're not actually talking. Next up.
I'll go if no one else is in line.
Please.
All right. We had an interesting conversation. I think the summation of it is that this is a very successful approach to managing people, and that it really speaks of a more collaborative relationship between the employer and the employee, more communication, less of a hierarchy, more of a common purpose. And beyond that, rather than management trying to decide what will motivate their employees, management should ask their employees what they want and structure the employment accordingly. Alessandro's son works for a company where they are given free time to work on projects that they have to be billable for the company, but anything they want to work on. And it's something that's worked quite well for him.
Perfect timing, Jim. And I scribbled something up here to capture a little bit of your notion of encouraging collaboration between employers and employees. So is there one more Zoom group to report?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I was in a group with Bob and Wayne, and we talked about a few things. One is this video was created in 2009, so a lot has changed. And one of the things that I took away was that there is something now called an EOS, an entrepreneurial operating system, and there's a lot of that right now that is reflected in this video. Also, one of the things that really stood out, knowing Wayne's background with the space program, is him having the ability, this is from a long time ago, way before the video, but just the ability to get a bunch of really smart NASA engineers and sit them in a room together and let their creativity flow and, not have it be so structured. So I think, Wayne is a great example of how that style can succeed. And on Bob's side, he mentioned, his own entrepreneurial efforts and potentially buying certain companies and the people that he winds up working with. How do you incentivize them? Is it this way that we just saw? There's clearly some advantages to that, but we also talked about the notion of sales and how so many people bounce around from one company to the next just for a higher paycheck as it relates to sales.
I love it. I get to cut off a past president, a revered past president of this club. I think I will get payback at some point.
All right.
Okay, does that finish the Zoom reports? Okay?
It does.
Thank you.
So maybe I could start with saying, if I just babble on forever, you could cut off a past president and a past district governor. So at any rate, I'm wasting time. Oh, all right. Well, we talked about childcare and the rules of childcare, which makes me think about maybe look at children and how they interact if they're given free time. We talked about a lawyer who chooses not to work for a huge company with all the rules and stuff, but chooses a small law firm. They don't make as much money, but they like each other. We talked about the rules of construction. They cannot interfere with the rules of physics. And finally, I'd like to suggest that Rotary is a good example if we ignore everything above. One profits most who serves the best. That's our motto, and the reward has nothing to do with money.
Thank you, Peter.
So we had a group of all very intrinsically motivated people who have had some experience with this. We have someone whose son works for a company with the Row model and finds that he's working harder than he ever has. And the problem with it now is the company finds getting people to take the time off. Another potential problem is how do people who are running a company one way switch to do this? That can create difficulties. I definitely want to show this to my husband because he is an example of all the worst that he was talking about. Also, we've had someone who worked for a company that started this a long time ago in trusting and building team members and using the Myers-Briggs to really build out the best skills of people. Another potential question is, for people who are motivated, this works great, but what about the people who have had trauma and are lacking that motivation or just can't find it? How do you begin to build that in people? And regarding Rotary, a former member, Marlene Wilson, had written a book about engaging volunteers. And so the idea of we need to find out everyone's skills and strengths and how to help pull them in.
Thank you, Cinda.
Thank you, Cinda.
Not the president.
But I'm not talking, so
Okay. We had a wandering discussion, as many probably did, but first I want to focus on the Rotary part of this, because I think Rotary exemplifies the process of autonomy and motivation. Everybody in this club is here because they're self-motivated and they believe in service above self. And one small example that comes to my mind is the water stations. I mean, somebody in this club said, we need those, and we can install those around the city of Boulder. Very simple, self-motivated, persuaded other people to go along with them. I mean, the whole project in South Dakota, the water project, big deal, many clubs involved, but that's, to me, is what drives most of the Rotarians. We talked about the work ethic of Americans. We work much longer hours than almost all the countries in Europe, and we're fairly productive. France works far fewer hours, Germany works even fewer hours, and they're among the most productive in the world. So.
Thank you, TK.
Great. As a note keeper, I think I failed, but here goes. We did talk about politics, how they get into politics with all the right reasons, but before you know it, they spend half their time raising money to get reelected, and the other half creating pork bellies to get back to their constituents, and in fact hardly accomplish anything. Somehow I think that they do, but it's not on purpose. The bottom line is that it's sort of reflection versus response. So that, for example, someone sends you an email that turns you off, rather than getting on the computer and hacking off a response quickly, it's probably best to wait until the next day. Okay, that's it. That was fast.
Thank you, Sam. Marie.
We talked about carrots and sticks that work for children, paying for grades, maybe not so much. Looked at the different international styles, which might be apparent. And then also the idea with fundraising that there needed to be a financial potential before something like that occurred. Talked about the idea for Rotary, that there are many, many options, and service being a major pull for that. And always that there's some way that you can find to get back, we can always participate. So I made it, but 32 seconds left.
We'll invent a new award, Rotary Award for that.
I've never had to be on a time limit like all the presidents that have been speaking, and past presidents. So our group has a variety of experiences because when you're an accountant or dealing with nursing, you have a lot of rules that you can't just walk away from. So how do you, within that framework, give some autonomy? Maybe you give time off when, hey, you got your job done, go ahead and go home. So that, and on the other hand, my husband was totally motivated by the backslapping and awards that he got as a writer, and not so much by who cares about the money. So I think we didn't quite solve our problem on how to fit this kind of creativity in as rigid a structure as you might have in some careers. But I think one example would be to achieve the mastery part, allow someone to gain mastery and reward them. That's a self-reward. Just do the motivational part of doing something that you've never done before. The young man that we were talking about that was a rookie.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you.
Over here so I can be on camera.
Yeah.
All right, so we had an observation in our group that we've all been living in an experiment on this whole talk on autonomy this last 2.5 years with working at home on Zoom and so forth. And it'd be interesting for some researchers to come back with data on how motivated that was and how productivity has gone up in that workplace. Focusing on Rotary, we're of course living in a candle problem right now with the challenge from our president of Rotary to imagine Rotary, thinking outside the box. So we think that Rotary, as TJ said, does a great job with autonomy. We're all volunteers. Nobody's telling us to show up. We're all great. We have a purpose in terms of working in our community and service. But what we need to work on is mastery. How do we do our job of doing projects? How do we get projects funded? How do we work together in Rotary to have meetings and execute, well? So that's, I think, the challenge for all of us is how do we master all the ways to be a great service to our community.
Thank you, Brian.
We had 4 people in our group that were all involved in professions and in the management part of professions, law, architecture, and medicine. And it was interesting that one of the people shared that once they laid out a timeline for how people would advance in the company, their productivity shot up because everybody knew a path that they could take. Autonomy was big in regards to people working at home. Also, productivity shot up for those people. And for somebody who doesn't work maybe well with other people, being autonomous and having a one-man show worked well for that person. And also how important relationships within an organization were so that people felt comfortable in the organization so that they could, excel in their profession. And the last part was we tied the autonomy in with Boulder Rotary in that in this club, if you bring up an idea, people are going to tell you to go with it. I brought up ideas. Nobody's told me no about anything yet, and I think that that's important in this club.
Thank you. Great job by everyone, and I think there was a lively conversation here. I particularly like the Rotary-oriented ones. One group said that Rotary exemplifies the ideas of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, which makes sense because we don't have carrots and sticks, right? Nobody gets a bonus for their work in Rotary. And I like the Imagine Rotary linking that to the candle problem. It's a new way of thinking about our visioning process, and I think we'll use that as we move forward.
We'll put everybody on the visioning committee in a room.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Cassidy, and thank you for your participation here today.
Thank you, guys. We are just over at 1:30. We're probably not going to be doing the brewer birthdays just because of timing, but I want to thank everybody. How was that? Was it fun to talk to each other, to think about like a new idea? As soon as you're clapping, thank you. You can say no. That's part of this issue too. This is an experiment, and we're trying to honor Dr. Berkowitz and make sure that we talk to each other today. And it's been a challenge. So today was our candle moment, our candle problem moment. And I think I am full of gratitude to all the professionals who are around me, all the people who make this work. So again, thanks to Fred and Lynn who jumped in, Carl, Vanessa, of course, she's amazing. We had Judy Pitt and Kathy Olivier at the door, and all the people who were over at the JCC to help us get over here. So don't forget, next week, this was just a practice for next week. All right, we're going to be here again next week. And thank you guys. I'm going to close the meeting because we're just past 1:30. Thank you.